It was late winter, it was late winter, it was late winter. It was the time when the day and the night are the same length. In the Highlands of Scotland, the whole country breathes a sigh of relief. The snow and the ice are finally at an end, and the green of spring is ready to come. But in Ancrum Glen, it had been a particularly hard winter, and this time, although full of hope, is known as the hungry months. The seeds have been planted, but they have yet to grow, and the animals have been hunted well into the hills, and it had been a particularly hard winter, and the people looked at each other with nervous glances. The chieftain knew they would have to find food. Now he had 4 sons. He had Fergus, and Fergus had gone to the Battle of Flodden Field and not come back. And he had Callum, and he had Ian, and he had Shorus, the youngest. Callum and Ian were both fierce rivals. They were always pitting themselves against each other, whether it be in sports, whether it be in battle, or whether it be in love play. But there was genuine needle between the two of them, and sometimes the love was not brotherly. And as most of the village's eyes was on their escapades, Shorus was often looked over. Now, Shorus was a quieter boy. He used to be teased for being a bookworm, but he was far happier by himself walking in the woods than being in the rough and tumble world of his brothers. The chief called Callum to him. Callum, the people are hungry. It has been a hard winter. You must go into the mountains and hunt a deer for us and bring us back food to eat. Be careful, for the rivers will be enraged with snow and the paths will be slippery with melting ice. So Callum took his bow and his quiver of arrows and took his bag and walked into the mountains. And he walked for 1 day and stayed for 1 night. On the second day, he came to a snow-enraged river, and across the river, he saw the most beautiful 12-tined stag he has ever seen that was pure, sparkling white. And he lifted his bow to fire an arrow at the animal. But as soon as he did, it was translated into an old woman with a staff and with a wild look in her eyes. Callum dropped his aim, and once more, the 12th-tined stag stood in front of him. Once more, he lifted his bow and arrow, and there was the wild-eyed old woman. He dropped his aim once more, and the stag once more appeared. Callum was now nervous. He knew there was magic afoot, and he lifted his bow up again and let his arrow fly. The old woman looked at him, easily deflected the arrow with her staff, and pulled at the air in between her and Callum, and he was dragged into the river. Callum had never learned how to swim, and he was buffeted and roughed and tumbled down the stream all the way until he arrived outside his village, and some of the men there pulled him out of the water, more dead than alive, buffeted and bruised, blue and already beginning to sneeze. He would do no more hunting that summer. The chieftain sighed and called his next son Ian. Ian, the people are hungry. You must go into the mountains and hunt a deer for us so they can eat. But be careful, for the rivers are enraged with snow, and the paths are slippery with melting ice, but also the Cailleach is afoot. Do not upset the Queen of Winter like your brother did. Now Ian was a lot more hot-headed and arrogant than his brother. He thought he could march into the mountains, get the deer, and defeat the Cailleach. So, he stayed in the mountains for 2 days and 2 nights, And on the third day, he, like his brother, came to a snow-enraged river. And across the river, there was the most magnificent 12-tine stag he had ever seen in his life, gleaming white in the glen. He lifted his bow, and as soon as he did, the stag was translated into the wild-eyed old woman with the staff. Now, Ian was not afraid, but he wanted some sport. So he dropped his aim and saw the stag return once more, quickly lifted it once more, and there was the woman, looking right at him. He fully intended to shoot her, but he dropped his eye once more. As he lifted his bow again, she was translated back to the old woman, and he let his arrow fly. The Cailleach looked at Ian with a look across her eyes that just said, "Dick," easily beat the arrow out of the air and pulled the air in between them, and Ian came tumbling into the river. And like his brother, he had never learned how to swim either. And he was roughed and tumbled down the stream until he landed at the feet of the women who were washing the clothes outside the village. And he was taken, blue and sneezing, into a bed next to his brother. He would not be hunting again this summer. With a heavy heart, the chief called his youngest son Shorus. Now, the chief didn't have a favourite, but he dearly loved Shorus. Shorus's gentleness and his quietness were a mystery to him, and he loved him deeply for it. And he tried to protect him all of his life. And he did not like the idea of sending his youngest son into the mountains, but he had no choice. Shorus, the people are hungry. You must go into the mountains and fetch a deer for us. But be careful. The rivers are engorged with snow, and the pathways are dangerous with melting ice. But also, the Cailleach is abroad, and she has injured both your brothers. Do not upset the Queen of Winter. Shorus looked into his father's eyes and smiled. Thank you, Dad. I'll do my best. I'll do the best I can. Hopefully, I will honour your wishes. And Shorus gathered these things and walked into the mountains. And he travelled for 3 days and 3 nights. On the 4th day, he came to a snow-engorged river. And across the river, there was the most magnificent white hart he had ever seen. A 12-tine stag, shining white in the glen. He lifted his bow to take a shot at it, and automatically they were translated into the wild woman of winter. And she stood and looked straight at Shorus. And Shorus, with his bow still aloft, shouted, "Grandmother, what would you have of me?" And the Cailleach looked at Shorus, narrowed her eyes a little, and let a half smile play on her lips. And she beckoned with one hand and turned to start to walk up the other side of the glen. Shorus instinctively knew what this meant. Follow me. He dove into the river and swam across confidently, for he had learned how to swim, scrambled up the other side, and although the Cailleach had not transferred herself back into the deer, she moved at a good pace up the glen and was already halfway up, and he had to run to keep up with her. When they got to the top of the glen, the Cailleach turned round and looked straight at Shorus, and he beheld her. And her skin was white, and her eyes were white, and an ancient power emanated all from her. And Shorus was sorely afraid, but knew he had to be with this woman. She turned around and looked at them, and with a voice that felt that was inside his head, said, "Set a fire on this hill. Tend it all night until the first rays of dawn, and I shall return." And with that, she left and moved across the land as if she was riding the wind, and as if her raiments were in water. Now, Shorus was a smart boy. In his pouch, in deerskin, greased. He had flint, steel, and hoof fungus, so he could set a fire wherever he went. He gathered dried heather and placed it in a pile, and soon he had a blaze that not only dried his clothes but kept him warm all that night. And he sat vigil until the first rays of dawn came over the glen. And with that, the Cailleach appeared. She looked at Shorus once more, looked at the fire, raised her hand, and the fire went to 3 times its height and glowed pure white. And she beckoned once more to Shorus, "Follow me." And she started to move down into the next glen. And Shorus walked behind her at a respectful and safe distance. After some time, they came to a small building, no more than 3 feet high. The Cailleach stopped and looked at Shorus. And once more with that uncanny voice, "In this building, there are 3 stones. Take these stones out and hold vigil with them all night. Do not sleep, do not drink, do not eat, but wait for the dawn." And with that, she disappeared. The Shorus thought this would weird them out a little bit more than it was, but the way things were going, it was weird enough anyway. So he just shrugged his shoulders and got on with his task. He went in to the tiny dwelling, and there indeed were 3 large, well-worn, weather-worn stones. He took each stone and dragged it outside, and even though they were much smaller than a human being, they were very, very heavy. And he was in a diminished state, so this was a difficult task for him. But eventually, all 3 stones stood outside the building. And he sat down to commence his vigil. And he was hungry, and he was tired, and he was cold. As it grew dark, his fears grew and grew and grew. What was he doing? Why was he sitting in the glen, following the orders of a witch? Maybe this woman meant people harm. Maybe they could harm his clan. Hadn't she harmed his brothers already? Was he doing something wrong here? He should go home and get some heat. He should leave this foolishness. This was wrong. But in him was a small, quiet, calm voice that said, "Stay with this, Shorus. Stay with this." And just at the darkest point of the night, just when his fears were at the highest, just when he felt the loneliest that he possibly could, a blue liquid light began to fill the glen. And the first ray of light came over the valley, and it struck the stones, and they were transformed into 3 of the most beautiful human beings Shorus had ever seen. There were 2 women and a man who stood there looking like they were part of the dawn. The woman turned and looked at Shorus and smiled. "Shorus MacNaughton, you have helped our sister Bera. Therefore, you have helped us. We are indebted to you. My daughter Brigid shall be your wife. Your clan shall never go hungry again during the hard months. All we ask of you is on every Beltane you come to this place and take the stones out. On every sound you put them back in." And Shorus took the hand of Brigid and walked into the land. And they came back to the village of the clan MacNaughton, where they bore many fine children. And true to their word, every Beltane the stones were brought out, and every sound they were put back in. And when Shorus was too old to do it himself, his eldest son performed that task. And they say truly, to this day in Taina Cailleach and Glen Lyon, those stones are brought out of that building on the first day of spring and taken back in the first day of winter.